Hello, welcome to 25 Cents, an Apple Arcade podcast and other things here on Good Stuff. I'm Chris.
And I'm Nick. Each episode we'll be talking about the Apple Arcade games we've tried, other games we keep going back to, and what we think might be great ones to check out if you've got kids.
You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts on the web at Goodstuff.fm. Fade that out. I was playing with the Cam Live overlays and got distracted.
Too fancy. Too many toys.
Yes, exactly. There's way too many buttons and things to push here. If you're watching on the live stream, I've got this I'd like to call it studio camera, but it's really, obviously just my office. It's not like, but it's like a wide angle view. I'm using a little plug for Reincubate Camo is the app that is actually just coming out of beta, I think next week. And so I picked up the copy of it, and it works really well for recording. Where am I pointing? The camera. Using your iPhone as a camera, more for not so much for live streaming, because Ecamm Live actually does it for me already. But if you want a little more control, because it's really cool with the software that it allows you to, on your Mac that it connects to over the lightning cable or whatever, it allows you to switch the camera lenses. So I can switch from wide angle to ultra wide to the selfie camera on the phone without having to go touch the phone at all, and then actually do a lot of manual control. So I can turn it where is it here? I have the saturation turned down, so it's black and white. It looks all moody and intense. But other than that,
I am a very low-level podcasting amateur when it comes to playing with these kinds of things.
Well, at the end of the day, it's like if all this stuff generally prevents me from actually putting a podcast out is the problem. And the 10 people or maybe 5 or 2 that actually watch the video version maybe appreciate it, I guess, but it doesn't help with the actual audio portion of the show at all. And if anything, it detracts from it because I get distracted and break something.
I suppose, yeah. But at the same time, if it motivates you to try new things in podcasting, whether that's in the edit or the production or whatever, that's good.
Yeah. It definitely helps keep it fun and interesting, and I like messing around with stuff. So we'll cover some of that in the Switch corner actually a little later that we'll get into. But what's new? You've got some quarantine corner notes here that I don't totally understand. What's going on?
Oh, I was just not too much has changed around here. The graphs are bad. They're not that bad here yet, but they're also not going in the right direction either. So we decided we had a family trip planned for Labor Day weekend at the end of August that we decided to cancel and get our refunds. So it's a little sad and that was going to be the 3 of us and my parents and my sister and her family. So it would have been all 8 of us going out to one of the islands in the Salish Sea. And staying in a house all together, but yeah, we just can't risk it now, and we're all having our own contact too much for different things, and it's too bad, but it's the nature of the world we are in right now. Although you were able to do a nice little isolation camping trip recently, right?
Yeah, and it's a bit of because I'll switch back here, because where I am in the world anyways, we have it's 4 people in the whole city that I live in that have COVID, I think is what the number is right now. And then the province at large, which is still around 1 million people total in a area much bigger than Seattle, I would imagine anyways. But with, I think it's 100 people or whatever total. I forget what the exact numbers are, but so it's way less. But obviously, as anybody knows, all it takes is one person in the wrong place and the wrong time and things explode. We just had a restaurant that, some people have been to. There was a server there so it's but it's very minimal announcements about that kind of thing. I don't imagine the Seattle area is announcing every time there's someone at every individual restaurant with it, COVID.
No.
It's just too much.
The only thing I saw recently was there was a restaurant that got shut down for I forget if anyone on staff actually tested positive, but they weren't following the county rules on operating a restaurant. So that was the one piece I saw in the news this week. Because Seattle proper is 500,000 people, but the greater Seattle area is bigger than that. It's bigger than your whole province population wise.
Yeah.
But so we've had sort of continued cases, and some of it's at like the nursing homes where it was all first detected, but it doesn't seem to be like really bad around here compared to other places because people are mostly good about staying home if they can, masking, all that stuff. So
Yeah.
we're still just being very cautious and avoiding the additional contact. So like this weekend is my dad's birthday, and I think we're gonna do a parking lot, gift and cake trunk exchange or kind of thing where no
Yeah.
one actually gets out of their car because that'll be the safest option.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a weird times, I know, and especially hard on the kids, I think and I mean,
For sure.
grandparents complain too, obviously a lot about not being able to hug their grandkids and stuff, but um, just confusing, especially for the younger set too, who are just
Definitely.
like, yeah, this is no comprehension of what actually is going on out
It's
in the greater world. And
it is a very strange time for kids and parents and non-parents alike,
yeah,
all in different ways.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, it was good to get out of the city for a bit here and get some fresh air and stuff. But even still, it was kind of like it's out like slightly upgraded outhouses for bathrooms and stuff that you're sharing with people. And you're like, we hand wash, sanitize, whatever after each use and stuff. Anytime we went anywhere, basically. And there's playgrounds that our kids are going to, and here, anyways, they're open and officially allowed to be used now, which they weren't before. Playgrounds, I mean, and so then they go to the playground, come back and wash their hands. But obviously, if some kid is on the playground sneezing with COVID, and your kid breathes that in, any amount of hand washing is not going to help them.
No,
So I was like,
at that
yeah.
point, no.
So that's where my head always goes. But yeah, it's kind of just the nature of have to relax a little bit, knowing that the odds are very much right now very low, but still being smart about it all. So
Right. Well, yeah, especially because your area has it so under control. You can be a little more relaxed.
yeah, but yes. So in Kids Corner, it looks like you said you had to enable screen time, so you're
Yes,
clamping down.
we had to enable screen time because I think it was starting last week. We realized the family iPad sits in his room at night for two reasons. One, to play a little bit of music while he's falling asleep, and two, so because his bedroom is on a different floor, he can call up in the night if he doesn't want to walk all the way
Nice.
upstairs, which doesn't happen too much anymore,
Yeah.
but it's available. Um, and what we realized was he was waking up early, like at 7 a.m., and we were sleeping until 8:30 or 9, and he was just on there. He was using, like, the school had given him some app called, or recommended an app called Epic that had like video and book content and audiobook content, and he was like spending a bunch of time on that. And we told him, okay, like if you keep waking up early and using the iPad, we're gonna lock it down. And so now all it can do in the morning is we allowed just the library app, like the books is the only thing, and
Right.
then like messaging us, I guess. So I just had to lock that down a little bit. We're not using any of the time limits yet for other parts of the day. Generally, we're around and able to, hey, like remind him that it's time to be done. It's time to stop FaceTiming your cousin, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had to lock down the nighttime or early morning access a little bit.
Yeah. That's it's kind of like, I mean, each kid is obviously very different in how they handle all that kind of stuff, and learning, even just the broader ideas of learning about that you can disobey your parents, and like that's a thing you can
Hmm.
do, is a thing every kid has to figure out and go through. And like, it's not, doesn't mean they're evil. It's just natural
No.
that you try and like you realize you can suddenly, your parents aren't actually there all the time stopping you from doing everything. And for us, it was I think it was when I had an Xbox. What was it? 360 was before the Xbox One, right? I think. Anyways,
Yes.
doesn't matter what it was, but we had a Xbox console, and just like you, we thought, oh, our kids are downstairs playing, and then he let it slip one time that he had not, like, without knowing that he was breaking the rules, he had gotten up at like 6 a.m. and was just like binging on Minecraft, and then we hadn't even thought he was doing that, obviously. And then he talked about doing it, and then we're like, okay, well, we're not actually going to do that anymore. Please don't, and whatever.
Right.
And then eventually realizing he kept going back and doing it, and that's where
Yeah.
the screen time sort of requirements, yeah, lockdown, or I think at the time we took away the controllers maybe just to eliminate the like even possibility of being
Right,
tempted.
right.
But yeah, eventually it morphed into using the screen time controls and stuff, and realizing
Yeah,
your
and
child
even
isn't an angel all the time.
yeah, I mean, my son's, what, over 6.5 now, and is certainly more prone to, well, I just want to do what I want to do. Like, you get to do what you want to do. Why can't I get to do what I want to do, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's mostly very respectful, but like having that conversation, setting those limits. But yeah, I mean, we kind of told him like, hey, we don't like this. We will have to limit it if you keep doing it out of your own desire or motivation. So
Yeah.
we had to limit it.
Yeah.
And we'll probably relax it again at some point. It's summer now, so it kind of matters a little less, but we also don't really want him just like doing whatever when we're not in the room, because even with the basic parental restrictions on, there's some weird stuff, even in some of those school apps that he had access to. Like some of the cartoons are weird, or it's just not content that we've really like
Yeah.
chance to review and say, yeah, this is not just age appropriate, but you appropriate.
Yeah, exactly. That is the biggest one, I think. And even as teachers send out stuff, we noticed anyways with our various kids, like they would send our youngest kid, whose teacher, grade 2, is sending them links to like fun sites for doing crafts on or whatever. And when you actually go to them, it's like one of those pop-up ad hell sites where like there's play the game here, play the game here, play
Oh,
the game here buttons all over the
yeah.
place. And how's a 7-year-old going to know which is the right button and which is the button actually that like autofills your credit card in or whatever? And like,
Yeah.
you know, off you go to the races that way. But
Yeah. We haven't really opened up the browser, but at some point pretty soon we're gonna have a sit down of like how to use the web safely, right? Like even with the basic blocker stuff in place where you can't get to certain sites, there's still like how do you use a site that's like a little bit borderline? Like you're just reading an article and it's got all these popovers, right? Or whatever the case may
yeah,
be.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it is frustrating. At least the Mac at that point, and the computers there our kids are using are a little older, so they don't have the latest OS updates possible even. But the parental controls are kind of like either you're manually approving every single little thing they do, or it's like hope for the best, and it's kind of those two extremes of like.
Yes.
So you're
Yeah.
like, yeah,
The granularity is not always what it needs to be.
yeah,
I think we talked on a previous episode. You were saying the Xbox ones seem to be sort of the best that you've used.
yeah, yeah. The Microsoft ecosystem in general for that seems to be the best so far, and we'll see. I guess Apple, of course, has iOS 14 and Mac OS 11, I guess, or whatever, coming up in the fall, and whatever changes they made there. But it's definitely sort of device driven as opposed to specific software packages driven. And I mean, an Xbox obviously you have limited availability of what you can do. There is a browser there, but it's a very limited browser and it takes a long time to type out boobies or something in the search
Yeah.
field or whatever the kids might be searching for.
Yeah, it's the return of web TV.
Yeah.
I think you've shared a few times some of the is it Google that tells you like what your kids have searched for or one of the smart assistants?
Yes, yeah, I've shared like something triggers it where they do something and then it sends the Google app on my phone the like results. It doesn't always do it, but sometimes like I think if you say like, would you like more information about whatever you searched for, and then it'll send it to your phone and it says check your phone for whatever, and so then yeah, I'll get like the weird searches that they're doing on the Google Assistant some random time when they're bored.
Yeah, we don't have. I mean, we have Siri on devices. Although my son really just uses that for the dictation because he's just like on the edge of spelling. Like he can spell his sight words and some other words, but he likes using the dictation because he can kind of express himself a little more because his verbal level is ahead of his writing level right now. So he can use the dictation mode to
Right.
to get what he wants. But we don't otherwise really use the smart assistants. And usually most of the questions come to me or my wife, and then one of us will just look it up on Wikipedia or whatever.
Yeah.
So we provide the filter when possible.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
So all fun and games until someone
anyway,
pulls up a.
so we should talk about your latest Switch.
Yeah, so on the Switch, a friend slash drug dealer, almost I want to say, is loaning us Animal Crossing for the Switch for a while to test out, try it out, and then either we can buy it or he's going to, sell it himself because he needs to get rid of it as per his counselor. But so we've tried it out. I think it was we got back from camping and I set it up or whatever. And I guess in broad strokes, the Animal Crossing phenomenon that I've heard about, I kind of like, I understand a little more. It's kind of like Minecraft in terms of like a chill game, life simulator. I think Jay said in the Good Stuff Discord, you know, slow life simulator, I guess. But the idea of like, this is a game, you're just going to do some stuff, and it's fairly low. It's not high energy by any means, and it's chill. It's cute. It has nice sounds, and all those things combined, I think, to make for a fun gaming experience. Especially like whether it's, I could see like my youngest to my oldest are all kind of keen to try it, and they were actually tried it yesterday,
Hmm.
and had really good, like they were excited about it because what I'd done actually a couple days ago is trying out just streaming with it to the Twitch channel here on Good Stuff, and without our cameras working or whatever, but just I was showing them the game as well as testing out the streaming of it from the Switch, which I hadn't tried before, and yeah, it's kind of like a game where it's addicting in a sense where there's like always a thing to do. They sort of send you
Hmm.
on little missions to go get stones or go get this and to build this, and it's a more directed kind of game than Minecraft is, where Minecraft is just open world. And so I can see for some kids for sure, and even adults too, it's just like you got to go back in and check what today's like update is and what you're supposed to do, and where if you can get more resources to build the thing you're wanting to build, and things like that. But it also is like you save it, turn it off, and you can come back to it obviously at any point later. There's a bit of a unique kind of like shared world experience between us because I'd set up my thing and was playing it for, I'd played maybe an hour and a half of the game or so, maybe 2 hours I guess total with the stream, and then they'd logged on and they were able to, because I dropped some of my supplies, the wood and things that I had in my tent. I think they'd gone were able to go into my tent and take some of that stuff. They were very worried that they'd offended me and taken my axe or something when they shouldn't have or whatever. Way more worried about that than they were in the real world. Like my daughter will happily climb up onto the counter and pull sugar off the shelf or whatever that she's not supposed to go get. But then she's like apologizing and said like, "Don't worry, we didn't take your stuff, Dad." In Animal Crossing.
They really don't want to mess up your game.
Yeah. And as if I like had like militarized like the game console is like, "Don't you dare." But anyways, they were having fun with it. I think they're having fun with it right now. Anyways, it sounds like it. And so yeah, it's a fun, chill game. I would have no problem recommending it as a family-friendly game. It's a Nintendo game, published by Nintendo, and very family-friendly that way. The characters that are in the game are all round, soft, in every way of the term, and very easy on the eyes, very friendly communication. All the words and every opportunity to sort of like interact with things is very low friction, I guess. And yeah, so that's kind of like, I still don't know what the point of the game is and the purpose
I
really,
mean,
but
like you said, it's sort of just it's that slow life, just kind of chill thing. So I think one thing that wasn't clear on from the many people I know who play it was whether there are sort of timers, like some of the worst kind of IAP type games where like there's certain things that you start and then you have to check back in like the next day for it to finish, or
yeah, and that's what I haven't quite figured out yet, if there's events that I'm missing. So for example, with a shared experience here, because as a family on a one Switch console, the island that I started, now the kids that set up, join and play from their accounts, they're on that same island. And so I've
right.
read reports of like limited resources, like having to sort of negotiate with your family, like don't take all the rocks because I need them for this. And even in-game objectives, there was a museum that he needed like 20 or whatever it was fossils that you dug up and brought to him. I had started them, and then my son finished that objective. So, which is neat, like for sure, but also I missed. So then the museum opens, right, or whatever happened, but I missed that. I could see some kids being like ticked that maybe their dad or whatever, their sibling, finished an objective that they had done 19
Right.
of, and then they come along and do the
Yeah.
last one.
You don't get to see the cutscene or whatever the
Yeah,
case may be.
I think, and that's what I haven't logged back in since they did it, and they said, "Oh, Dad, I was me and the two other people who were on the island initially, like the two AIs or whatever, the other bots or whatever were in tents, and that's why you start with a tent, and then eventually you can build a house, I presume. But they said that when they joined, all the other people were in houses now, and I was still just in a tent, and so obviously something had happened where the game had progressed, and I didn't yet. I haven't yet. I'm still lowly tent dweller amongst these house owners. So yeah, it's interesting that way. And then the oh, there was one other thing I was going to say with that, but it'll come to me. Yeah, and yeah, like yeah, what sort of because I was really confused about the game. Not like confused, like I get that it's just a game that you play and like, but just the way the attraction and the appeal of it seemed overwhelmingly in almost obsessive relative to what I felt like the kind of the game it was. But I kind of get it a little more.
Right. I mean, I know I've alluded to before, like a lot of my kid game time was on these sort of long, slow simulation games, like in the 4X genre, like the Civ games or some of the sim games. But I think those had a kind of different sort of interaction because there was like a win condition and there were also lose conditions, right? Like you could mess up and not really be continuing, whereas you can't really mess up your island. It just slows down your progress, right?
Yeah, and that's the other thing that's interesting is the game is tied to the real world time. So just for like interest sake, I'm generally playing. I've at least so far the two times I've played, I'm always playing after the kids are in bed here, like in the real world, not the island kids, but and so it's like you log on and the game has a clock and it shows you it's 9 p.m. on Monday and the world is like the island is darker. And so I don't actually, if I kept playing at that time, I would never see the sun on my island. And so,
Got it.
whereas my kids are playing at 11 to 12 is their screen time or whatever when they've played. So they're seeing a very different view of the island even. And so that is where the one part of it where you allude to like the sort of in-app purchase of like getting you back to play the game because they need to whatever get you buying more stuff in the game. There is like a if you only go during the day or the night and some of like so the animals that you find so you catch it's this weird like fun cutesy but you're also like capturing all these animals and just like for fun and then giving them to the museum and so there's a bit of like weird but you don't actually eat any of the animals at least thus far. I thought like oh, I'll find a fish. I'm going to go barbecue or whatever the fish, but
Right.
that doesn't
Yeah,
happen.
you have to
Yet.
cook. You have to cook the food you catch or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so some of the animals are only available. They give you sort of a Wikipedia of all the animals, and you can kind of like collect them all. But there's some of them that are only available certain times of the year or certain times of the day, and that they'll come out or that you'll see them. They're most common, January to February or whatever. And so I can see how they've built in this like need to come back and keep playing it. But there's no in-app purchase or any reason why other than you're just playing your Nintendo Switch console and game that you bought and paid for completely. There's no extra motivation, I guess, for Nintendo beyond obviously creating like an addictive kind of fun experience as far as monetary reasons why they would want you to keep coming back. But that would be the one danger, I guess, I could see a kid getting sucked into it and like, Dad, I have to play now because the wombat or whatever is, coming across the island right now. And so,
right.
But yeah, my oldest, the 13-year-old, was like, I can see how this could be addictive.
Yeah.
But then went
and
back to Fortnite happily.
The kids being different ages, like they're sort of finding their own thing to do, or are they all kind of doing the same stuff?
Yeah, I mean, this is the
I
second
was
day.
curious.
I think my youngest actually didn't have screen time yesterday for a variety of reasons, and so she's now getting to experience it for the first time, I think. And so we'll see what her report is on it. But she was definitely like visually, it's very right up from a 7-year-old to even my wife and I were when she was watching me play it the other night. It was like it's very visually appealing in a cutesy Nintendo-y kind of way. It's just fun to look at and nice to watch and stuff. And chill music, background music, much like Minecraft. It kind of feels like the kind of thing where you could put on if someone's played it long enough, you could put on the soundtrack from Animal Crossing and they'd probably just lull themselves to sleep in a nice calm zen state. So
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of like buying it or not, like Nintendo historically has never really had many sales on games, and it's like at least up here it's $75, $80 for the game, and there's like tons of gameplay to be had in it, and there's like they just updated it with the ability to swim in the ocean and catch ocean animals, which obviously opens up a whole world of stuff for kids or people to do, and even the world like that you're in, there is some sort of like nature, you're learning about the animals a bit, like loosely, like the museum guy will happily tell you 3 or 4 paragraphs about the animal you've caught. So I mean you can kind of like loosely say it's educational in a weird way. So
you don't hear too much about edutainment I feel like that was a big 90s game genre, is all these edutainment games, like Carmen Sandiego and Oregon Trail and stuff.
Yeah. So I think like if you have the access to it, as far as for kids, especially your kids or whoever's kids, if you're listening out there, if you have access to a library to borrow it from, that'd be the greatest way. Obviously, like many games, to just try it out and see. But I have fairly, unless you really hate that kind of genre of game, there's enough hooks in it to keep you coming back. Like I'm a little more action oriented, at least purpose oriented in the gaming I want to do. And even still, for me, it's like there's a pull to go back and dig up more fossils and see what's next, what opens up next on the island. And it's a very weird kind of like economy on the island too, where and this is what I think other people have alluded to, where someone might sell like a whole bunch of seaweed that they've collected, and that like drives down the price of seaweed on the island. And so, because there's too much in the for sale side or whatever, and so then someone else can't progress as far because they don't have opportunity to make money the same way you did. And yeah,
Interesting.
so we'll see how it goes with kids.
See
I'll
if
do
it
future
sticks.
episodes.
Well, we will
Yeah,
have an update next episode, maybe how
yeah.
if you're still if it still has its hooks in you or some members of the family.
I like the idea of it. So I was saying, I tried streaming it the other day, and I love the idea of using it as a streaming sort of like I'm doing this anyways, and chill, like people watching and kind of like giving feedback or suggestions on what to do, and even like the fact that I was streaming the game on Twitch on our Good Stuff channel, and then you pick the game that you're streaming, and right away there was like 2 or 3 people who popped in and left, but like that doesn't really happen when we just stream podcasts or whatever here. And they're asking like to share, can I join your island or can you come to my island or whatever right away? And I didn't really want to get into any of that, especially with my kids watching. I have no idea what might happen if I go visit someone else's island, but so
Right.
we'll see where that goes. But anyways, that's 5 minutes or longer on the Switch corner. What about Apple Arcade corner?
Um, so haven't tried anything new lately. We can get into some of the games I've gone back to, but there was one piece of interesting Apple Arcade news that was in, I think, Bloomberg about with some details for the first time on some of the business models, which is that some contracts got canceled. Like those developers did not meet whatever the milestones were in terms of, we've kind of guessed gameplay time, or number of downloads or something like that, some sort of engagement metric, like your game helped people continue on Apple Arcade, right?
Yeah.
So we don't know which games were canceled, but that kind of goes to the conversation we've had of like, oh, sometimes games have updates, and it seems like certain games are getting new content and certain games that felt like they could have more content aren't. And I think this is maybe a clue to that, right? Is that there were games that were built, they didn't have a pre-built plan for new content updates that were like easy for them to develop, new levels, new story, whatever. And the game wasn't played enough for them to get additional funds from Apple as a producer to keep adding to the game. So I kind of wonder, like, will some of those games be kind of retired out of the library because they're little unpopular dead ends, or will they just always be there as like this little reminder of what might have been for that particular developer's success? And the other thing that was interesting is the comment in there specifically that someone was quoted as saying, we need more games like Grindstone,
Yeah.
which is funny because that was certainly the game I've spent the most time on. The game I usually recommend as like, hey, here's like a really great reason to play Apple Arcade. And it's also interesting because Grindstone, I think we've talked about before, is the most like sort of other popular mobile games, right? Like it's a little casual puzzler, but unencumbered by all of the in-app purchase nonsense that often comes with that style of game because it's in Apple Arcade.
Yeah. Yeah. That jumped out at me too in the article about Grindstone being it seems like that's an obvious hit. It's easy to get into. And that's where, like I think we alluded to in earlier episodes too with Apple Arcade, is as much as developers want to have this freedom to develop this great, intricate, cool looking world that you did play, is mobile gaming really ready, or does mobile gaming even want that as a game to play when you have the choice of any game to play on Apple Arcade that you're paying for? And people are still gravitating back towards like you said, the in-app purchased style quick games. And obviously if it's based on some sort of user metrics or development milestones that they were wanting them to hit, and it seems to allude to, like, while it says, while Apple ended contracts, it still paid studios based on the development milestones they already hit. So obviously at some point they're like, if X many users install your game, then you'll get this extra bonus or whatever, presumably. And so there's some sort of, obviously that Apple would have all sorts of analytics on and data on usage of all the apps that
Right.
are games that are installed. But yeah, if there isn't actually people continuing to use those games beyond that first experience, I don't know how they would ever get more money out of their experience there. And presumably the Apple Arcade subscription whatever graph has leveled off, and if anything, it's probably dropping now as people are kind of not seeing maybe new games they want to play, and sort of wonder now if Apple's canceling some of these contracts, how much of their heart is in this for the long
Right.
run, or if they
I mean,
just
they
say,
keep saying services, but yeah,
yeah,
I wonder if it means they're going to reposition to try and get other kinds of games or what. And it's a little sad because some of the very artful, beautifully made story games, I've really enjoyed having access to those on Apple Arcade because I don't think those necessarily would have existed. And to be honest, I probably wouldn't have spent, $5 to $10 each, not really knowing, but because it's from this all you can eat Apple Arcade buffet, I've tried them out.
yeah,
And those are probably not the ones that Apple is looking for in terms of stickiness. I mean, they want some of those for like the demos, right? You can say like, look at this amazing game experience.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I mean, and it probably goes to the developers on the sort of game design concepts, core loop. Like Grindstone has this very clear core loop, and you can basically iterate on it. They could keep adding levels indefinitely. I think there was one sort of similar mobile game I used to play called Dots and Dots 2, and my dad got really into it for a while. It's like I played up through, I don't know, level 200 maybe, and they've kept adding levels. My dad's on like level 600, and it's the sort of nice mobile puzzle game where you can kind of the core concept you can kind of just iterate on, and the developers can have this sort of low level maintenance amount of effort and keep adding levels indefinitely,
yeah,
as opposed to a big story game where you're going to have to do this big investment in art and writing and music and everything. And that can make for a great game experience, but it makes for presumably a much more expensive game that's not necessarily going to have as broad an appeal.
yeah,
Which kind of relates to one of the games I want to try that I saw in the arcade tab, which is Beyond a Steel Sky. But looking at the trailer, it's a story game. It looks like a game I probably don't just want to play on my phone, and also a game that I probably don't want to have my son in the room because it's a little more mature content, right?
yeah.
Not capital M rating mature, but just
The
for older
storyline
for
is,
older.
yeah,
Yeah, the storyline is for older consumers. And so then that goes to the question of like, well, when can I fit in games like that, right? Like it has to be that after bedtime time for the most part.
yeah. A child has been abducted in a brutal attack. So, yeah,
Yeah, I think we'll pass on that one.
for bedtime,
Yeah, yes, and for
story
bedtime.
time instead of
I think there
like,
was another recent arcade release that was something about like a kid in a coma or something, and I was like, and my son watched the trailer and he was like, "Oh, could we play this game?" And I'm like, "Well, just reading the description, I think we're gonna pass
yeah,
on that one." I'm sure it's a great game,
yeah,
not one for a 6.5-year-old, I feel,
yeah,
who is still sometimes prone to nightmares.
yeah,
I get
exactly.
nightmares. Everybody gets nightmares, but yeah.
Yeah. There's a new one that just came out today. I haven't looked at it much beyond, but just in the interest of letting folks know to check it out if you're interested in the Machinarium and Samaros developer, called Creeks. That looks, again, visually looks really interesting. And I have no idea about gameplay or interest at that way, but looks like a fun single player hand painted art style game that could be kind of a fun puzzly kind of game. To explore an old mansion to find hidden paintings and solve puzzles to uncover the mansion's secrets. So, yeah, in the interest of just, there is obviously new games coming out and new puzzly games and fun games. And you had alluded to, like, what are you going back to still in games
Yes.
besides Grindstone?
So, yeah, like I said, a Grindstone added 15 more levels, and I kind of slowly beat those. They're definitely getting harder. So as they add new mechanics, they're upping the difficulty level for people who have stuck with it, which is fun. I started. I had heard there was a new Over the Alps spy mission, which we had covered on an episode whose number I would have to look up. But it actually covers one of the pieces of feedback I have, which is you're now playing as a woman spy, but encountering some of the same antagonists from the first story. So that was kind of cool. The only criticism I have is they're like skeuomorphic outer menu is very confusing. Like I couldn't tell how to start the new mission pack very easily. But there's also a closed manila envelope that says top secret, which makes me think they're working on a third mission pack that would come out. So yeah, I'll finish that up. It's I like that gameplay. It's got that cool postcard mechanic and art style. And I'll see where that story goes. I don't think I would go back and replay the first story again, but maybe I would try to make different choices, as I said on I guess it was episode 10. And then I finished Winding Worlds, which I think I'd mentioned an episode or two ago as trying. It was pretty good. It's an odd story. The sort of the concept of what's going on. It kind of has this theme about like self-care and how much can you help others if you're not helping yourself, like built into the story, which is interesting. Um, and mechanically, it's about the same. Any given one of the puzzles, you're sliding up and down or left or right to make things kind of spin around and fall into place and be reassembled. Um, and one of the interesting things about that game was in the credits, they actually had a First Nations acknowledgement. So like
Mm.
where the studio is located in Canada, they were talking about um, the people who live, on the land or who lived historically on the land where they are located. I guess in Montreal area. And yeah, I've started to see that kind of thing more. It's the first time I've noticed it in a video game, but I've noticed it like many local businesses around here in Seattle will acknowledge that they're on Duwamish land, which is the tribe that Chief Seattle is from. And so that seems to be something that's more in the consciousness. Um, I don't know if they're like contributing money back or something like that, like as part of their acknowledgement, or if it's just the acknowledgement. But interesting to see. Um,
Yeah, that's a very common, or not, sorry, I shouldn't say very common. It's a somewhat common thing up here, has been for a few years now, for acknowledgement of, especially like sort of treaty land or land that was originally designated or was actually not just designated, was the First Nations community that happened to be in that area. Like we'll often, at speeches or events, public events, they'll announce
mhm.
like, thanks to wherever we happen to be, as a original, this is home to that population or whatever. And yeah, it's an interesting thing, and to see it coming into gaming, I think is a good thing, just to bring awareness, if nothing else, to what's going on. I think, and where we've come from, in light of everything that's
Yeah,
going on in the world. Obviously, it's important to
yeah,
acknowledge that.
it definitely connects in a different way, but with some of the stuff a lot of the racial justice conversations that are coming out of the current Black Lives Matter moment, at least in the United States. I've seen other sort of conversations around that, and some of the recent decisions around pipelines in at least our Supreme Court and so forth is it gets connected with. Um, it's interesting to see that in video games as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, kind of wrapping up on Apple Arcade, my friend Andrew had a couple comments as listener feedback. So one was, that you can in the Apple Arcade tab you can see games with new updates, and you can also see games recommended for you, but there doesn't seem to be a section of games you've played that have updates, right? So like
Right.
Apple definitely knows what you've played, and they definitely know what games are getting updates. But why can't they tell you, the that intersection, so that hey, I uninstalled this game. It kind of goes to what we were talking about the previous episode. I uninstalled this game, but there's actually new content that I will want to play because I finished that game, not just that there's a game with updates. Um,
It feels like they
and
could
then he
benefit
and I were
from.
bemoaning the.
Oh,
Oh, go ahead.
yeah, we're off sync again, I guess, a bit. But it feels like they could benefit from like an Apple Arcade email newsletter, almost like just something outside of your phone. Obviously, you look at your phone maybe to check an email, but just something outside of the Apple Arcade experience directly, where it's just an email of like, "Hey, by the way, games you played, these ones have updates," and just letting you know in a very passive kind of way. Without That's not a notification and not a like some sort of Apple Arcade app on its own or whatever, I guess, and outside of the store experience, but just like, by the way, whatever, Grindstone has new levels and might
Right.
want to check it out. Here's how to
Yeah, I
reinstall.
mean, Blizzard emails me to let me know when there's new Hearthstone content available for purchase, or even try to incentivize me back with some freebies. So it does seem like that's a part of the Apple Arcade engagement that they're missing. Um,
Even
and
the
then one
like,
of the other things.
oh,
Oh,
go, got some. I was just gonna say the something like that seems really obvious to me with that Steam does really well is you have your wish list and then they tell you when stuff on your wish list is on sale. It's like a simple. I don't know how many times it pulls me back to Steam just to check because it's like, oh, City Skyline is on sale for $3 or whatever. And I still have never pulled the trigger because I know it's just a game that'll suck my life away. But I have it on my wish
oh yeah.
list and they tell me every time it's on sale. And like, I don't know why Apple, I think Apple had like even in the iOS App Store has like a wish list functionality, but it's just like a place to go look at your list of things you've saved theoretically that at some point you'll
And
go
I
buy.
think they removed that in
Oh,
a
maybe they
couple
did.
iOS versions ago because I used to have stuff on that and I would track things like I'd see a link on Twitter, but I wasn't ready to get a game yet,
Yeah.
and I'd put it on there. But yeah, I think that all disappeared. And so that kind of goes to the other thing Andrew and I were talking about was the death of the Game Center app a couple of iOS versions ago. And people always made fun of the green felt, right? And so like
Yeah.
Game Center now is just this library, and it's integrated with Apple Arcade and with other iOS games for online play and for achievements, but um, you can't really like view it all in one place. It's like a little menu within each game, right? Um, so there's not like one place for you to go and get that info. Like, what are my friends playing?
Yeah.
There's no, that social loop is missing right now, and wasn't part of any of the iOS 14 announcements, I think. And I kind of wonder, they retired that a while ago, and they're just not interested in going back to it for whatever reason.
Yeah. It's one of those things that Apple is just notoriously bad at is any sort of social thing. And I don't know what
Yeah,
the reasoning.
ping, right?
Yeah. Like Ping. And then they had like a huge thing. It was like with Apple Music and then artists are going to basically blog and, Coldplay or whatever is going to post updates about what's going on inside Apple Music. And like, you can see like the artists do it for a couple of weeks because they were probably paid to do it or whatever, and then it disappears. And even the like social interactions that you see that would be possible with a game center kind of app that Xbox Live does great with, Fortnite does great with, like tons of apps. Nintendo is okay at because they actually it's funny there's something obviously with their hardware that's not powerful enough to do voice chat in game on device. And so they actually punch you to an iOS app that's your Nintendo Switch app. And then with that, you can do voice chat
Got
with
it.
your friends if the game is configured to allow that or speak to that or whatever. And so they at least try. But yeah, Apple has. I don't know if it's like a legal thing where they just don't want to get into like any sort of user created content is just a mess of lawyers and they don't want to deal with that, or I don't know. But it feels like if you're playing Over the Alps or Grindstone and we're friends on Game Center, it would be beneficial to everybody involved, myself included, even to be aware of that. Like, hey, Nick,
Right.
whose opinions I respect, and we play these other games. Why not let me know that he's playing that one? And especially for like the multiplayer aspect of many of the games, like the Lego one, Lego Brawlers or whatever that we
Right.
tried initially. Feels like why else wouldn't you want to know if your friends are playing this without having to ask them
Right.
directly?
And then you can drop in and or challenge them or
Yeah,
whatever. Yeah.
yeah. So
Um,
that's
I
what.
have to pause 1 second.
Yeah, put some elevator music on. Do, 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 do.
Co Coffee refill
Oh,
is in progress.
nice,
Uh, I just had a little small gopher come to retrieve my mug.
nice.
Um,
You must be playing Animal Crossing.
sorry. We can cut that out. Well, yeah, because I think when I go to the social tab on the Switch, I can see exactly how many hours some of my friends have put into Animal Crossing, for
Yeah,
example. Like my old roommate is at home on parental leave with a relatively young child, and he's been playing Animal Crossing a lot,
yeah.
and it's kind of fun to see that, and maybe tease him about the number of hours I see tick up every week. Um,
Well, it's
yeah, it does seem like a gap.
yeah. Every other like Xbox too, like to almost to annoyance. Like we were, my wife and I were watching. We streamed Disney Plus on our Xbox just because for whatever reason our TV the sound isn't good with Disney Plus, but the app on the Xbox works fine. So we're playing it on there, and then I see randomly at some point is like my cousin or my nephew or whatever pops up, so and so is playing Fortnite, or Dave Rupert is watching Netflix or whatever, because like it has little notifications of like when your friends pop up, and you can turn it off, which I should do because it does kind of take you out of you're in like a deep moment in Hamilton, let's say, and then all of a sudden Dave Rupert is playing Overwatch or whatever. You're like, oh, well, that's great to know right now. And, but it is just like that, the idea that like this is a social experience, and I game for myself, but also for the social experience. Like even just, yeah, like the Nintendo Switch thing is kind of fun to know that my friend Jesse in San Francisco is about to play something, or that, yeah, there's people I could connect with who play Animal Crossing, and we could share islands or whatever is supposed to happen in the game. So I won't hold my breath for Apple to actually do anything with that, though.
No, it seems like there was no indication at WWDC, and it is just generally not their thing. So I think that's another one we can put on the pile with the missing Apple TV, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Although that hardware is probably more likely.
I'm trying to remember if they actually even mentioned Apple Arcade, other than maybe a brief promotional, like as a thing that you could develop for. But at WWDC, the keynote thing, I don't even know if it was mentioned much at all. So, anyways,
definitely not as much as it was front and center at WWDC 2019. There might have been a session on it. I'd have to look at the web videos. But.
Yeah, I'm sure that, unless, like, I mean, I think we'd hear about it if it was actually completely dropped off the whole developer radar. People would notice that part. But anyways, hopefully, I still have hope for Apple Arcade, and especially as it relates to, like I've said basically since episode 1, Apple Arcade to me, for me personally, would work best on an Apple TV, in front of the TV, as a shared experience with my family, not on my phone. That's just me. I know there's lots of people who love mobile gaming, and more power to you, and hopefully Apple Arcade is working great for you. But that's why the Switch, for example, has drawn me away from Apple Arcade in terms of dollars and time to spend. And so if anybody's listening and wants to send a beta of Apple TV 8K or whatever it's going to be called hardware, I'm happy to test it out.
You'll need a new TV just to see the games in their full fidelity.
It's funny on that my kids were like complaining that because they've been playing games and they get some from the library. They got the Lego Star Wars series or Harry Potter series on the Switch. He borrowed it for, but he was complaining that he had to play it on the Switch screen instead of the TV screen, and how that was going to be like the end of the world because my other son wanted to play Fortnite on the Xbox on the TV, which, you know, obviously is the only way you can play it on Xbox. And then they actually sat down and played with the Switch on the Switch screen itself, and had fun doing it. And, you know, it's this kind of neat semi-mobile experience where they each have a little controller and sitting in front of the screen. It's smaller, obviously, and it's not as nice as a big screen, but I was like, the whole point of the Switch is that you can take it and literally go play it. And so anyways, it was a good little moment of remembering that it's okay to not have the 50-inch or whatever TV in front of you at all times. But we should probably sign off.
Your eyeballs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think this is a good show.
So thanks for listening to 25 Cents, our Apple Arcade and video game in general podcasts. You can find me on Twitter at iChris.
You can find me on Twitter and most everywhere else as Ultra Nerd. That's NURD.
And you can find 25 Cents wherever you listen to podcasts. And be sure to check out the Good Stuff Patreon to join our Discord and other funky benefits. Patreon.com/goodstuff. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.
All right. How long was that?
All right, I actually need to drop off for a meeting.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think
got scheduled at 11. So.
All right. So, yeah, send me the files when you can. No huge panic, but just throw them in Dropbox.
Will do.
And?
Later, Chris.
Yeah, see ya.
Good talking to you.
Boom, 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 boom. I need like a closing going away screen. Where is it here? This one? This one, except with it's over. So let me add a new scene. I'm out of shortcut buttons. Oh, I did have one. Stream is over. Hello, if you're out there, the show is over. We just finished recording. Nick had to run to a meeting, and I'm just messing with stuff here as I Get Ecamm live set up. Stream is over. Thanks for boop. Put a carriage return in there. Or what does that look like? There we go. So that is that camera there that you're seeing that angle on is the. Yeah, let me just pull it up just for fun. Camo. That's our re-incubate. Go to desktop view. This app that you should check out allows you to. This app allows you to control the camera, your iPhone or iPad camera, as if it's a web camera on your computer. Lots of apps do this. Lots of them out there. I think this one is really cool. It works really well, first of all, in my experience. And so you can see I dialed up the gamma a bit and also took the saturation out of the feed, just of that particular angle, just to give it a bit more of a, I don't know, artsy studio feel. But I can switch from the ultra wide to the wide angle, so that'd be a little closer, or even to the selfie. So showing the other side, obviously, which is just happens to be the door. And I can turn on the flash even if I want to. Dial it up, brighten up. Interesting. You can pause the camera, so then if you're doing something stupid, nobody can see. And then you can actually zoom as well, and then move the zoom around a bit. So if you're wanting to sort of frame it in just on the Elgato logo sticker over my mouth, unshaven face, you can do that. You can rotate it for some reason if you wanted to, if you had set up the camera wrong. And you can actually also dial in all sorts of settings here if you wanted to adjust for the room in a different way and get to see how it adjusts for your particular settings of your room as it changes. Blow it out. I guess I don't have the saturation on, so it's make it look all cool if you want. Different filters, sort of effects. Anyways, it's coming out of beta next week. I would heartily recommend it to check it out, especially if you do Zoom calls and things like that, and you don't want to use your cheap camera on your computer. It looks way better than that. So if I switch over to just me, so this is like the web camera that I got, the HD, what is it? Logitech C920 HD camera. If I switch to, actually I think I disabled it. Let's see, camera, re-enable built-in one. Still not showing up as an option. Switch. Anyway, that's the built-in camera. That's pretty garbagey. Maybe it looks okay on the stream if you're depending on where you are. The C920 camera, which is like an $80, $90 camera, webcam, USB port, that works really good. It's better for sure, but this camera is like rock solid, amazing camera, and especially if I switch to like the non-ultra wide, and if you were just using it, if I had it mounted above the computer instead of over there, you can see it's just worlds better than this one even, which isn't awful. But and since you likely already have an iPhone camera of some sort, an iPhone device, so this is an iPhone 11, but the iPhone XR or whatever, it'll work 1080p if you want. And there you go. All right, thanks for watching. If you're out there, we'll see you next time when we stream. You can subscribe on the Periscopes or the Twitches. We'd love to have you back again sometime, and we'll see you later.